Hi, my name's Dave and I'm a licensed therapist working in the Student Health Center at Bakersfield College. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about overcoming patterns of underachievement. There are a lot of students who get stuck in cycles of avoidance and procrastination that can really make school a miserable experience. Staying focused in school is already a struggle in these times, without the added burden of these internal habits of underachievement and self-sabotage getting in the way. The information I'm going to pass on to you right now might make the difference between your academic career being exciting and productive versus miserable and fruitless. Most people don't understand why they fall into patterns of underachievement, achieving below their ability. Underachievement often becomes an all too familiar cycle that looks something like this. You start off with the best intentions and commitment to academic greatness, but gradually the motivation decreases and you begin a pattern of avoidance and procrastination. You tend not to notice it at first because the defense mechanism of denial is very effective. Then it catches up to you. Maybe you get called out by a teacher, you fail an exam, and it all blows up and you start to punish yourself. You say things to yourself like, you're lazy, you're worthless, you'll never get it right, etc., etc., etc. Then when you've beaten yourself up sufficiently, you go back to your previous commitment. With a desire to escape the feelings of guilt and anxiety, you begin making genuine efforts, and eventually you get back on track and things start to feel good again. But as soon as the guilt is gone, so is the motivation. And the short break that you were going to take to enjoy your new state of contentment once again turns into avoidance and procrastination. And you find yourself again unable to keep your head above water. And the cycle goes on and on and on. Sound familiar? You're not alone. For many people, that cycle of underachievement can last a lifetime. Why does this happen? The reason so many people get so stuck in this cycle, when in reality they're very capable of being successful, is because they've internalized the state of shame and guilt during the formative years of their childhood. And that state becomes so conditioned that the person unconsciously recreates it over and over and over. In the formative years of development, the brain is rapidly formulating its neurological connections that will set the stage for the person's perception of reality later in life. These connections can be changed and altered, but they tend to be reinforced and strengthened over time. And the person becomes unaware of the fact that there are other ways of thinking, other ways of feeling, other ways of being. If there's trauma during these years of development, the emotional state that the trauma evokes gets wired neurologically and can cause faulty patterns in the person's thinking, faulty beliefs about the self, and faulty patterns of behavior. Incidentally, most people believe they have never experienced trauma because we as humans tend to perceive everything that we experience as being normal because we don't know anything different. But childhood experiences don't have to be traumatic to affect a child's development. Insults, criticism, unrealistic expectations, excessive anger, withdrawal of love and affection, guilt trips, hostility, bullying, as well as any kind of abuse can cause a child to internalize shame and guilt. You might not consider these experiences to be abusive, but that is not the question. The question is, what emotional state was evoked in the child? How deeply was that state registered neurologically? How early did it happen? How frequently did it happen? People tend to believe that if those experiences don't bother them in the future, they're not affected by them. This is the single greatest misunderstanding in terms of a person getting stuck in life. And most people never come to understand what is really keeping them stuck. It's not our memory of those experiences, but the emotional states that were neurologically wired that indicate how we are affected. If our childhood experiences condition the brain with shame and guilt, then we will continue to recreate those same states later in life, oblivious to the reality that what they are struggling against is not a lack of ability, but simply their early conditioning. This is what happens. The brain registers that emotional state, and the neurological pathway to that state is strengthened and reinforced over time. Eventually, it becomes our normal, our go-to, and we don't even know it. Look back over the course of your life. Have you experienced a continual reappearance of the state of shame and guilt that you attribute to just being lazy or being a screw-up? The reason we continually find ourselves in that state, if we do, is because it was internalized in our formative years for reasons that were not our fault. And our brain actually pulls for that state. Your brain wants to go back to that state because that neurological connection is so strong. And it pulls us there, no matter how miserable that state might be. This is why people tend to keep themselves in negative situations, including their own negative patterns of behavior. Then, the things we tend to do to escape that misery typically end up recreating the very same feelings of shame and guilt that we're trying to escape to begin with. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. That's why addiction is so powerful. The addiction, whatever it might be, serves two functions. It distracts us from the pain that we tend to simply label as boredom, but it also provides the state of shame and guilt that the brain is neurologically addicted to. The reason we do bad things is typically because the brain has become conditioned to feel the feeling that results from the bad behavior. It's not because the behavior is so desirable. It's not because we aren't capable of doing the right thing. It's because the brain continually seeks the same shame and guilt that it experienced in the formative years of development. All this happens outside of our awareness. We're typically unaware when we are setting ourselves up for these cycles of shame and guilt, until our behavior is seen by others, until we're called out, until something bad happens. Then we go into that horrifying state of, how did I let this happen again? It's a very deceptive and powerful pattern. That's why it's so hard to change. We just don't see it. But if we can see it, then our opportunity to change it is exponentially greater. None of this is your fault, but it is our responsibility to correct it, to heal that wound. And the path of healing is not self-criticism and self-punishment. Think about the things you tell yourself when you fall short and beat yourself up. You're lazy, you're worthless, you'll never get it right. Are those not the very same things that we were told in childhood that created those states of shame and guilt to begin with? They become so normal that we use them on ourselves. So what do? If we stop feeling guilty, won't we just go deeper into the bad behavior and be okay with it? That's the question that I'm asked over and over. Here's the answer. Continue to strive for positive behavior, but stop making guilt your motivation to be good. Replace guilt with a desire to invest in yourself. You deserve to invest in yourself. You're not seeking good behavior to please your parents. You're seeking good behavior in order to invest in yourself, to actualize your potential. In this state of being true to yourself, you're more likely to want to be available to others, not feeling resentful about it. In this state, learning can become enjoyable. When you fall short, don't beat yourself up. That reinforces the cycle. Instead, reaffirm your commitment to invest in yourself. Beating yourself up really lets you off the hook because once we've punished ourselves, we go back to business as usual. But committing to take responsibility and do the right thing for yourself, because you are worth investing in yourself, that will move you in the direction of authenticity and healing. Learn how to invest in yourself. Learn to do things in a different way, in a way that is investing in yourself. See how much more enjoyable life becomes when you're taking care of yourself and your responsibilities. If you invest in yourself intentionally and consistently, that will become your new normal. You were never a bad person. You may have internalized negative behaviors, but those patterns can be undone by changing your approach. Becoming you is a creative process. The present is full of potential and possibility, and you have creative license to create the you that you want to be. but it requires intention. It requires being present, because if you aren't present, you will simply fall back into what is familiar. Being present requires being aware of yourself, not just the situation that you're in. Being intentional requires consistently being aware of what you want for yourself and taking the actions to get there. It's almost impossible to really change behavior without structuring your time. Use a planner or a calendar. If you forget for a week, don't give up. It takes practice and intention. There are very few people who are successful in life who don't use some means of structuring their time, because using our time wisely is not always intuitive. Be kind to yourself, even when you fall short. Talk to yourself like you would a child who needs support, because in that ego state, that's really what we are. There are too many positive coping skills for me to list them all here, and you probably already know most of them anyway. But without this foundation, we simply don't utilize the positive coping skills that we know. Instead, we self-sabotage. We get to a certain level of progress, and then we let things go. I'll follow this video up with a list of coping skills, but let this be the foundation, the beginning of your healing process. You are worth healing. You are worth investing in yourself. You're capable of success, and you deserve to be successful. When you notice yourself being pulled back into old patterns of behavior, and you probably will, watch this video again. Or if not this video, something else that's inspirational. Do whatever it takes to keep recreating the positive state of self-worth and self-actualization. If you need help, seek it out. You don't have to be crazy to be stuck. It happens to the best of us. Let this be the semester when you really do turn things around. Good luck and enjoy investing in yourself. Enjoy the process of learning and developing your mind, creating your future intentionally.